bracing for impact. Hurricane Michael reaches Category 4 status.
This storm is fast approaching. The people here are in grave danger.
And in their lust for power, the Democrats, they've gone crazy.
You cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for.
If the Democrats do not retake the House, I really think they may lose it all.
The president has told reporters that he has 5 people on a short list to replace Nikki Haley, the U.S. ambassador to the UN.
It's just very important for government officials to understand when it's time to step aside.
The Media Research Center just released a study that found 92% of the coverage of the president over the summer was negative, which is an outstanding number.
2, bouncing ball, going to be a tough play. Nunez gloves, throws, and time! The Boston Red Sox win the division series.
This is a Fox News alert. Look at that number right there. Hurricane Michael, now a Category 4 monster storm, packing 140-mile-an-hour winds as the outer bands of the storm are starting to lash the Panhandle and the Gulf Coast.
They say it's extremely dangerous. We have team live coverage. Janice Dean is keeping a close eye on that hurricane, which could be the area's strongest landfall in 13 years.
Yep, and we have live team coverage too. But we start with Griff Jenkins. He's at Alligator Point in Florida. Hey, Griff.
Good morning, guys. We are hours from the eye coming in east to our west in Panama City, but on the east side of where it is expected to make landfall, the storm surge is a grave threat along Alligator Point where we are. This is the Gulf of Mexico behind me, and homes just like this are in serious threat of being entirely washed away. And the reason why, guys, is because the combination of unprecedented possible 12 to 14 foot storm surge along with the miles and miles, upwards of 40, 50, 60 miles of shallow water in the Gulf behind us washing into this area with a Cat 4 storm and going into the low-lying marsh areas all the way 30, 40 miles due north to Tallahassee. This area is guaranteed to flood. That is why in Franklin County and Wakulla County, the officials have said that you must get out. And just moments ago before we went live, along this road I want to show you quickly, we just saw people that we met yesterday rushing out of here. We asked them to stop and talk to us. They said, we've got to go. We're heading west and north as fast as we can. This road washed out on a much smaller nothing burger hurricane, Hurricane Hermine, 2 years ago, but it did do unbelievable damage because of that shallow water and storm surge, which was just a few feet, nothing like the 12 to 14 coming very quickly. I just want to give you Lieutenant Chris Savory with an urgent message for what the dirty side's going to do to this area.
We're going to be on the dirty side of the storm, and we're going to be in it for a while. A lot of people forget that it's not just going to go straight when it hits land. It's going to take a turn back towards the east. Well, that keeps us on that side, and it just lengthens any kind of horrible conditions that we're going to be facing.
And so we're going to throw it back to you. We're not going to stay here very long because once the winds pick up, the storm surge will follow, and it won't be safe here. But anybody in this area on the Big Bend sector that still has a chance to go, you got to go right away. It may even be too late.
That's a horror show.
Steve, Ainsley?
That's a horror show behind you, Griff. I don't know if you can realize how close these waves are to you.
Well, we wanted to give you a look because we feel fairly safe at this point because this is the precursor. It's 100 miles or more out to sea. But, boy, it's going to change fast, and you do not want to be in it. And, really, the people that tried to stay behind because they're worried about their property, don't worry about your property anymore. You can get more property. You can't get another life.
Exactly right. All right, Griff, get back in the truck and get going. Somebody who is riding the storm out is Mike Huckabee, who lives not too far from there. He built a new house up to hurricane standards a couple of years ago. He will be joining us live from his house in 20 minutes.
I have a friend, her parents have a house right there on the beach that we used to stay in when we all went to college at Florida State, and she just started building her house last Friday. She sent me a picture of what it looks like, and a lot of it is the structure's already there.
Yeah, tape everything before you leave. Janice Dean is with us. Janice, you've been tracking the storm all night.
So to give you perspective on this, Category 4 hurricane has hit the state of Florida 10 times, Cat 4. This part of the state has never, ever been hit by a Category 4 storm. So this is historic for them. They've never felt something like this. 140-mile-per-hour sustained winds, and the storm is expected to still strengthen as it impacts the Florida Panhandle as well as the Big Bend, because the worst side of the storm is going to be the east side of the storm. So they're going to get the worst of the storm surge, in some cases 14 to 15 feet, which will put homes and towns underwater. And that's going to be the dangerous part of the storm, in addition to heavy rainfall, in addition to hurricane force winds for hours, and the tornado threat as well. We have one. I just want to show you, this is the Saffir-Simpson scale. We are Cat 4 here, 140 miles per hour. So we are a strong Cat 4, not just a minimal one. And this will be a catastrophic wind event. Catastrophic wind event. So as we go through time, expecting landfall somewhere between 1 and 3 p.m., making impact on the Florida Panhandle, but the results are going to be felt not only for Florida, but parts of Georgia, Alabama, up towards the Carolinas, with heavy rainfall, heavy rain impact. Tornado watch already in place. We could see dozens of tornadoes, weak tornadoes, but ones that could cause structural damage. So this is obviously a big story. The tornado threat will extend into Georgia and parts of South Carolina, and some of the areas that were affected by Florence will also be affected by rainfall. The storm surge, though, by the way, will be historic in this area, and that's what's going to put all of these areas underwater.
All right. On the dirty side of the storm, as they say, Janice, thank you very much, 8 to 12 feet. We're going to be talking to the governor of the state of Florida. Rick Scott's going to be joining us live at 7:20 to give us the very latest, because Florida, the Panhandle, is getting ready for Michael.
And I know we got to worry about the hurricane, and that's first and foremost, but it's also an audition for all the candidates. Senator Rick Scott wants to be Senator Rick Scott. People want to see how he handles the state. Ron DeSantis has a chance to get his hands dirty in Florida and show some leadership, maybe by his side. And then you got Gillum, who's running to the Democratic side. He's got to worry about Tallahassee. So what kind of mayor? How is he going to act under pressure? This all, meanwhile, they're not campaigning at all during a key point in the midterms.
Well, you kind of still are, because the state is watching how you're going to handle the storm, what your reaction is going to be, if you're going to be out there helping the people, if you're going to get evacuations out in time. It can hurt or help them.
Absolutely. But during a time of a natural disaster like this, you got to set politics aside.
Correct.
That was not the case last night in Council Bluffs, Iowa. The President of the United States had one of his rallies. He's doing everything he can to turn that blue wave red. And in Iowa, he was supporting Republican candidates, and he announced that the EPA would allow for year-round use of ethanol in gas, which is a big boost to Iowa and Midwest corn farmers who have been damaged and hurt by some of the tariffs.
I love to hear those little nuggets of information, things that don't necessarily affect many people around the country.
Ethanol.
But when he says, I'm going to lift this ban because in the summertime you can't buy it, and he promised that on the campaign trail, and now he's saying he's going to lift it, the crowd goes wild because it means a lot to them. Many of them are farmers.
All right, here's a little of the president where he feels as though the Kavanaugh situation and the confirmation and the turmoil that surrounded it is going to affect elections. And keep in mind, at the midterms, you got about 68 seats currently held by Republicans are firmly in play, just about a half dozen Democrats. So this is going to be a sprint with so much consequences. Listen.
This is truly a historic week for America. Brett Kavanaugh was nominated. Radical Democrats were on a mission to resist, obstruct, delay, demolish, and destroy. Democrats have become totally unhinged. You don't hand matches to an arsonist, and you don't give power to an angry left-wing mob, and that's what the Democrats have become. They would turn our country so fast into Venezuela, and Venezuela's not doing too well, folks. In just 4 weeks, you will have the chance to render your verdict on the Democrats' outrageous conduct. On November 6th,
he also called out the protesters. He said they're phony protesters because they're out there getting paid, and now they're protesting because they're not getting their paychecks.
So, you know, you've got the optics over the Kavanaugh. You know, during the confirmation process, there were so many protests and there were demonstrations, and that's why the White House is trying to label them as a mob of people. And then you've got Hillary Clinton yesterday. She was on CNN with Christiane Amanpour, and she said something that really had us scratching our heads. She said that at this point in our history, you cannot be civil with the Republican Party.
Right.
You cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for, what you care about. That's why I believe if we are fortunate enough to win back the House and/or the Senate, that's when civility can start again.
Really? So you're going to continue to get harassed in restaurants and people are going to protest outside unless you vote for the Democrats?
Right. That's what she's saying, and she's blaming the lack of civility on Republicans as if Democrats have no choice.
Republicans aren't the ones doing this.
You have Rand Paul, his wife, saying, well, basically, I sleep with a gun.
Yep.
Rand Paul saying, I think someone's going to get killed. Steve Scalise said, tweeted out something to the effect of, really? Lack of civility? So instead of her reining it in, she is trying to own that portion of the Democratic Party. For some reason, she's desperate to matter, and she's desperate to say, listen, I'm still your leader.
Well, I mean, is it a bullying tactic? Is it saying, many people are saying, I want it to stop, I want our country to unify again? Is she saying the only way that'll happen is if you vote for Dems? But then you have people in the Senate. Well, saying we're not backing down. You can continue to bring it on. We're not backing down.
Well, you know, those images have motivated the left and the right. Because when the left sees, hey, maybe it's working. Look what they did to Jeff Flake when he was cornered in that elevator. But then at the same time, Republicans say, look what happened with Ted Cruz or Sarah Sanders run out of a restaurant. Rush Limbaugh had this observation about what will happen if the Democrats do not win the House.
If the Democrats do not retake the House, I think Washington may be uninhabitable for a while. I think we haven't seen the meltdown that is going to happen among many elected Democrats. They are so certain they're going to win this. They've already banked on the win. They're already planning to impeach Kavanaugh and Trump. And if that doesn't happen, I really think they may lose it all. And very quickly.
And then Rush went to break.
He did.
There you see
on the EIB network.
Right, I can hear that in my voice. I go, wait, we got to hurry up and toss to break. But here's a couple of things. If you ask the American people what they care about outside New York, Washington, and Los Angeles, it's health care. And if you actually want to resonate, show something workable for health care, it rates number one almost everyone's I care about list.
Sure.
And for the Democrats have one advantage. 50% of their ads mention health care. For the Republicans, only 17%. They used to run from it because Obamacare had such a stigma. Now they're actually taking a bow because of it.
Well, the Democrats are absolutely energized. They are at a 10. You can't double that. You can't go to a 20. You can't vote twice. The task for the Republican Party and the president is to keep the Republican Party and the independents who lean to the right energized for 4 weeks. And these days, that's going to be tough because the news cycle changes
they cannot
every 36
discount
hours.
the Republicans and their base and how fired up they are right now. After the Kavanaugh thing, I believe it really helped the Republican Party.
All right, so what do you think? Email us friends@foxnews.com. Also, we're on Facebook and this thing called Twitter.
13 minutes after the top of the hour. Nikki Haley's resignation. Everyone's wondering what's going on there. Coming just 4 weeks before the midterms, but will it have any impact? Matt Schlapp on that next.
Yeah, he was as surprised as anybody.
And President Trump is holding a rally tonight in Erie, Pennsylvania. What do the voters want to hear there? Todd Pyro, as you can see, is in the kitchen. He's having breakfast with some friends, and he's flipping stuff over.
I just want to let you know, so at the end of the year, Nikki will be leaving?
It has been an honor of a lifetime. I think that it's just very important for government officials to understand when it's time to step aside.
Nikki Haley rocking Washington by announcing her resignation as UN ambassador. It comes just 27 days before the all-important midterms. So what impact, if any, will this have? Here to discuss is Chairman of the American Conservative Union, Matt Schlapp, whose wife, Mercedes Schlapp, is in communications in the White House, and you were shocked.
I was on air with Fox with Sandra, and the news came over the wire, and I was shocked. I mean, it's a little bit of unusual timing right before the big thing coming up is the election. There will be changes, I'm sure, in this administration, although I'm not privy to them, like there is in every administration after every election. And this was before the election, so it demonstrates that probably Nikki Haley was just to the point where she was ready to take the next phase in her life.
I never remember a UN ambassador with more power and more impact than her. She asked for two things. I need access to you. I need be a member of the National Security Council. She had the respect of the Secretary of Defense and both Secretaries of State. How did she do it?
This is a tough job. And anybody who knows Nikki Haley knows that she's a forceful person, and she's also a charming person. I think actually the president enjoyed his interactions with her. He knew that she was up there on the floor at the UN and could give him another perspective, that not just from the Department of State, but another perspective of what these countries were thinking.
Matt, the other thing is the resignation. It was written 2 weeks ago.
Right.
And when it was officially announced, it was top secret.
Yes.
Why was this the first secret kept in Washington?
Well,
I mean, and shouldn't the Trump administration try to mirror that line?
Yes. Yeah, I almost want to fist pump here. Like, there are things that just you don't need to tell the New York Times. And I applaud the fact that the team held it undercover, and the president, held it undercover,
and
which
her
I think
team
was
did.
Absolutely.
Jonathan Swan broke the story. He was on a radio with me. He says, I got the story, but I still don't know why she's leaving. I watched them last night at 6. He goes, I still don't know why she's leaving. Why is she leaving?
Well, in Washington, oftentimes people try to look for the most complicated reason. It might be just really simple. She's been on a long slog being governor, 2 years as UN ambassador. This is a tough job, and she might just want to do something and hang out with her family a little bit right now.
A replacement. Dina Powell, the president
She'd be great.
Rick Grinnell.
He'd be great.
But he says, I really like him in Germany.
Right.
I want to enter a few. What about Ryan Zinke, the Navy SEAL with foreign relations background in Congress?
He'd be great.
What about Joe Lieberman? The president liked him. Evidently, he offered him Secretary of Defense or considered him for that.
And FBI, he was under consideration as well.
Kelly Ayotte.
She'd be great.
She became one of the three amigos when Lieberman retired.
Yeah, hey, these are good suggestions. You might need to get into the personnel.
I was waiting for you to nix any of them.
Look, I worked with Dina when she was at the National Security Council. I worked with her in the Bush administration. She'd be very talented. I know the president really likes her. I think the key in these jobs is you want somebody in that job who, when you're dealing with these representatives of allies and enemies, they know you're speaking for the president.
Right.
That gives you an extra stick. And remember, this person basically reports to John Bolton, who had the job.
Right.
So
Who
it's
didn't know
very
anything about it.
interesting.
Hey, good job, Matt. Great to see you.
Good to see you, Brian.
All right, coming up straight ahead, the media is praising the Kavanaugh protesters as peaceful. But remember when they labeled the Tea Party street thugs? Our next guest is calling out the bias. Plus, we're tracking this hurricane, Hurricane Michael, as it closes in on Florida Panhandle. Not wasting any time. We're live in the storm zone.
We are back with a Fox News alert. Hurricane Michael has intensified to a Category 4 storm now. It's about to slam the Florida Panhandle. The governor sounding the alarm for folks down there to get out now. Jonathan Siri is on Panama City Beach, where mandatory evacuations are now in effect. Jonathan, what's it looking like this morning?
Good morning, Aisley. As you can see, the rains are really picking up as the outer bands from this storm begin to move in. People are taking the warnings very seriously. When we arrived here yesterday, most businesses were already closed, people boarding up their houses and heading to higher ground. But as with all storms, you're always going to find some holdouts. Take a listen.
We've just been through so many that we're comfortable staying, so we're going to. And we've got enough food and generator, gas, so we'll be just fine.
The view from space shows Hurricane Michael as a well-organized storm over the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Those warm waters fueling the heavy winds that could drive a storm surge in excess of 13 feet in some parts of the Panhandle. Governor Rick Scott urging residents not to take any chances.
Hurricane Michael is forecast to be the most destructive storm to hit the Florida Panhandle in decades. This storm will be life-threatening and extremely dangerous. This storm will bring torrential rain to most of the Panhandle and Big Bend, which means flooding will be a major issue.
And the storm also brings the threat of tornadoes, Ainsley. This part of Florida and portions of Georgia remain under a tornado watch until 5 o'clock this afternoon. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan, for keeping us posted on that. Now we're going to hand it down to Steve, who's downstairs. Hey, Steve.
All right, Ainsley, thank you. Switching gears, peaceful activists or political rioters? When it came to protests during the Kavanaugh confirmation process, mainstream media saw it this way.
Protesters both for and against Kavanaugh's confirmation are making their voices heard.
And you can see a few protesters up there. It's sort of an act of civil disobedience.
There was nothing violent about these protests.
One of the principles of our democratic process is that protest is patriotism, and they're showing that every single day with that courage.
That courage. But compare that coverage to the coverage of Tea Party protests about 10 years ago.
This is a party for Obama bashers, and I think this is not really family viewing.
Do you think that there are racist elements in the Tea Party?
You've got these guys going around acting like street thugs. I mean, it isn't far from what we saw in the 30s, where all of a sudden political parties started showing up in uniform.
Okay, a little different. Here with a closer look at this media bias, Sagar Enjeti, White House correspondent for the Daily Caller. Sagar, good morning to you.
Good morning, Steve. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So the folks in the last couple of weeks who were protesting Kavanaugh, patriotic, courageous, civil disobedience, but when the coverage came to the Tea Party back in 2009, street thugs, racist elements in the Tea Party, things like that. Why the double standard?
Yeah, you really could not see more of a stark difference. And it really is because a lot of the sympathies for these protesters are held by some of the reporters themselves. And there really was an active effort to cast them in the best of light. They made sure not to cover the most extreme elements. Anybody who was here in Washington knew that there were some really violent threats. All you had to do was spend a little bit of time on Capitol Hill and see how the members had to be surrounded at all times by police in order to keep them away from really some of the most violent people that received only coverage from places like at the Daily Caller.
What do you make, though, of the imagery? You see all these people. Some of it is violent. Some of it's certainly noisy. No problem with that. But then you see Ted Cruz getting run out of a restaurant, things like that. And then you've got the Republicans, in some cases, referring to this as mob rule. Is that appropriate?
In some cases, it certainly is. I saw a few people trying to actually say that a mob did not drive Ted Cruz out of a restaurant. I watched that video. He was quite literally surrounded and separated from his wife in a Washington, D.C. restaurant. I've seen members unable to get into elevators, members who are unable to get into their cars without being accosted. It's a terrible time here in D.C. And part of the real scandal here is that they are not receiving any real critical coverage. And in many cases, they're actually receiving positive coverage, which only emboldens them.
Well, and you look at the coverage regarding President Trump. The Media Research Center did an analysis. We got it over on the big board. Coverage 92% negative. So perhaps that does shade what the manner in which some of the mainstream networks do cover this administration and politics in general.
92% isn't surprising. What's even more interesting in that study is that the thing that got the most coverage was actually the Russia investigation, which is something, if you look at the polling, that people care about the least. I'm in the White House briefing room every day, and from where I stand, there are a lot of people who are much more interested in impressing the people around them by asking about the Russia investigation than in delivering the actual news that the American people care about.
Well, and according to a Media Research Center, between June and September, the Russia collusion investigation on the networks got 342 minutes, and then followed by immigration with 300, Kavanaugh fight close to 300 as well. But then the administration's economic achievements got 14 minutes. Not much.
Really? Yeah, not much at all, especially when the economy is under a fundamental transformation. We have a new trade deal with Canada and Mexico. These are things that affect the lives of millions and millions of people, and it deserves a lot more scrutiny.
Absolutely, and it would be nice to get some publicity so people know what's going on. All right, Sagar, thank you very much for joining us live from our nation's capital.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. All right, meanwhile, it turns out the Supreme Court didn't blow up during Justice Kavanaugh's first day on the bench yesterday. So what was it really like? We're going to try to take you inside with what we know. Plus, millions of people are in the path of Hurricane Michael as the Category 4 hurricane is barreling toward the Gulf Coast. Governor Mike Huckabee is there on the Panhandle in his house. We're going to talk to him live coming up next.
We are back with a Fox News alert. Hurricane Michael intensifying into a powerful Category 4 storm as it barrels toward the Florida Panhandle.
Hurricane hunters measuring the monster storm, packing 140-mile-per-hour winds right now. More than 120,000 people have been ordered to evacuate from the storm zone.
Do not underestimate the power of this storm. Anyone that's been asked to evacuate, don't wait. Get out and get out now.
Hurricane Michael expected to make landfall within the next few hours. The best news, Janice, Florida, if any state can handle it, Florida can handle it, right?
Well, I hope so. I mean, this is the strongest storm to ever impact the U.S. in history. 145-mile-per-hour sustained winds is the forecast when it makes landfall across the Florida Panhandle, which has never withstood a hurricane of this magnitude in history. So here's the latest coordinates. Here's the latest track. We are expecting this storm to strengthen as it makes landfall across the Florida Panhandle, anywhere between Panama City and Apalachicola, as a 145-mile-per-hour sustained wind storm. It will eventually move into Georgia and the Carolinas at a tropical storm. The good news, it's going to be a quick mover, but it is going to cause catastrophic damage. We have a tornado watch in effect until 5 p.m. for parts of Florida up towards Georgia, and the storm surge is what is going to be potentially life-threatening, with a storm surge of upwards of 12 feet to 15 feet along the Big Bend of Florida. And of course, the tornadoes, we could see dozens of reports of tornadoes. So this is something they've never had happen in this part of Florida, and that's why we're concerned. There wasn't a whole lot of time to prepare, so people need to heed the warnings, listen to your local officials. We'll certainly keep you up to date.
All right, JD, thank you very much. Meanwhile, right there in the target area along the Panhandle is the home of former governor of the great state of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee, Fox News contributor. He's live there in the Panhandle. Governor, I've been to your house. You gave me a tour. It is beautiful. You just built it a couple of years ago up to storm standards. But I remember you saying, you know, this impact glass is good to like 150 miles an hour. This storm is at 140 miles an hour. Why are you still there?
Well, my wife was working at one of the shelters yesterday. We're trying to help some of our neighbors. Some of them are going to come and stay with us. I mean, we may test the structural integrity of this home. It was built to withstand, you know, extraordinary force of up to Cat 5 hurricane. But a lot of it is that we're going to be on the left side of the hurricane. We're about 20 miles, 25 miles from Panama City west, east of Destin. We're going to get hit hard, but nothing like our neighbors and friends over in Panama City and St. Joe and Apalachicola. They're going to catch the brunt of it, and it's going to be devastating. I think, you know, I woke up this morning during the night. It had moved from a Cat 3 to a Cat 4. And the one thing that I will tell you, Governor Scott has done a magnificent job in laying out resources and assets in advance. He's also done a great job in helping to coordinate with locals, and the local officials have done a very fine job of providing shelters. And then there's something else that's happening here that I think is just incredible. It's the real story. Neighbors are helping neighbors. People are helping board up each other's homes. They're making sure they're checking on homes where people have evacuated, or maybe they don't live here full time, and so they're picking up their lawn furniture and putting it away for them. This is America at its best. You know, all the politics can be very divisive, but crisis sometimes causes people to realize that at the core, it's neighbor helping neighbor and good human beings acting like it.
Because we all can relate to that. We all work so hard to build that, to build your home for your family, and that, you know, no matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, we all feel the same way, and we can relate to that. Let's talk about the big news yesterday when Nikki Haley resigned. People weren't expecting that. There's a short list for who could possibly be the next UN ambassador. Dina Powell's on that list. Ivanka Trump is on that list. Who do you think it'll be?
I have no idea. I think the president will pick a great successor to Nikki Haley. It's going to be a tough job to fill because she's done it better, in my view, than anyone has ever done it before. She's been terrific. She's been strong. She's been firm for Israel. She's pushed back against some of the bullying that has happened by many of these little pipsqueak nations who can go and kick sand in America's face. Not anymore. Not when Nikki Haley has been there. And I truly think a lot of people are trying to speculate, well, why is she leaving? Well, she's been there 2 years. She's been in nonstop public service for 14. There's something that I can relate to. It is very grueling to do this, particularly in one of these jobs. Living in New York is expensive. I think there's a side of it. She has a family. She needs to earn some money because public service, you make some real financial sacrifices. And I think all the people trying to think there was something nefarious, I think they're just wrong. I think she just needs to open a new chapter in her life.
Governor, you tell me if this is important. It's not only should you be experienced, you got to buy into what President Trump wants to do. And he's given you 2 years of a template to understand what's next. So if you have these people, they might be great people that are only halfway in, will talk behind your back and leak. If you want proof that Governor Haley wasn't leaking, Ambassador Haley wasn't leaking, look at the fact that we didn't even know about this. The Secretary of State was left out of the loop, and so was John Bolton. You know that she was not the problem, and it makes me wonder: is Dina Powell the answer? Are you the answer, or is Ryan Zinke the answer?
Well, whoever takes this job, the one quality they need is to be loyal to this president and his agenda. If they're not, then they shouldn't take the job. This isn't about them. It's about a person who was elected to be president. I cannot emphasize enough. Only one person in this administration was elected by the American people, and that was Donald J. Trump. Everyone else serves at his pleasure. And they need to give him the pleasure of serving the agenda that the American people elected him to do. That's why when I hear about somebody leaking, I think they ought to be fired on the spot, and they have humiliated themselves, and it's disgusting. Anyone who betrays the trust of this president after he's given them a job, they have no reason to deserve not just that job, but I would never hire a person like that ever for anything, because you can't trust them. They're liars, and it's just not right.
All right. Governor Huckabee, thank you very much. We wanted to check in on you as the storm heads your way. We're thinking about you and your wife, Janet, who was working at the shelter yesterday. Good luck to you.
Stay safe.
Thank you, Steve. We may be testing out some of those recipes from the Happy Cookbook today.
Start with your daughters.
Mike Huckabee's got a
that's a
pork
great
butt
one, but there's
recipe
some
in there.
wonderful recipes in there, Steve.
Thank
I
you.
love the book. Thank you.
You bet. All right.
And of course, why wouldn't he love the book? Because you got a tour of the house, you had a chance to see it. Ainsley and I are left on the outside again.
Listen.
So the Huckabees have 2 recipes?
They do. A pie and pork butt.
All right.
Delicious. Cover all the bases. All right, Governor, good luck to you. In the meantime, 18 minutes before the top of the hour, and Jillian joins us on this very busy Wednesday with Fox News Alert.
That's right. Good morning. And we have brand new video that was just released of what Turkish media is calling an assassination squad. The 15-member group believed to be linked to the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The clip comes from inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, where he was last seen more than a week ago. Surveillance video also shows a black van, take a look, leaving the consulate. Turkish officials think he was targeted for criticizing Saudi leadership, something the Saudis deny. Khashoggi is a U.S. resident, and his fiancee is now begging President Trump to help figure out exactly what happened. California officials don't know if thousands of people mistakenly registered to vote by the Department of Motor Vehicles cast ballots in the June primary. California's Secretary of State now wants to freeze the DMV voter registration program, which has registered 1,500 people to vote incorrectly. That number included at least one non-citizen. The finding comes a month after the DMV said there may be 23,000 voter registration errors. Well, the Boston Red Sox hold off the New York Yankees in a game that went down to the wire.
It's the 1-2. Bouncing ball, going to be a tough play. Nunez gloves, throws, and time for the out.
And that's all she wrote. A close play to end the game as Boston wins 4-3, advancing to the American League Championship Series. They'll play the Astros on Saturday, while the Brewers and Dodgers play in the National League Championship Series on Friday. That's Look at Your Headlines. Send it down to you.
Right.
Did you see all that champagne?
Going to waste.
They were excited.
Red Sox in Yankee Stadium celebrating, not good. All right, straight ahead. Turns out the Supreme Court didn't implode on Justice Kavanaugh's first day on the bench. So what was it really like? We'll take you inside next.
And Todd Pyro's having breakfast with friends ahead of President Trump's rally in Erie, Pennsylvania. We're going to find out what the voters want to hear tonight. So we'll go to him coming up.
But first, they want some more coffee.